Hello and welcome to Sectors Up Close. I'm Angeline Ong. Now, our focus today is biotechnology, and our guest is Patrick Healey, President of Caliber Financial Partners. Reputationally and financially, it has been a good year for biotechnology, especially drug makers. The global race for a coronavirus vaccine has propelled some pharmaceutical companies to household names, and with billions more people to be inoculated, there are billions of dollars to be made. Now, this index, the Nasdaq Biotechnology Index, has managed to return 35% over the past year, although it is unchanged since the beginning of the year. Some of the names that make up this index you might recognize, such as AstraZeneca and Moderna. But as you can see, investing in biotech is not only about vaccines. It can also be risky for individual investors who do not benefit from detailed knowledge of these companies and their product streams. So how to invest? Let's ask Caliber Financial Partners, Patrick Healey. Hey Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. Do you think the oversized returns for this sector, according to that index, is especially reliant on the pandemic, and will this trend hold this year?
Well, 2020, obviously, the COVID pandemic has dominated the news headlines, and for good reason. And I'm impressed with how quickly pharma has really galvanized efforts and resources to finding treatments and cure and a vaccine, of course. But that being said, the biotech space is always one that is a good investable thesis in terms of outcomes, not just for COVID, but for other terminal illnesses and hard to treat diseases. And so I do expect that to continue in 2021.
Now, Patrick, total deal values of biopharma, therapeutics and medtech companies fell by almost a third last year, according to Deal Former, as big pharma focus on developing vaccines to fight and stem the pandemic. Will this trend still be in play this year, and how will it affect investment in this sector?
Yeah, so I do think that a lot of the deal volume was put on the back burner in 2020, and for good reason. The focus and priority was on finding a treatment for COVID. That being said, I do think COVID is going to be a seasonal issue, and so there will continue to be efforts dedicated to that. But there are a number of other ailments and diseases that do not go away, and so the treatments will continue for those efforts. And I do think there's going to be a lot of consolidation now that we're into 2021. It looks like we're making a lot of headway with COVID.
Now, aside from vaccines, what else should investors watch out for in this biotech space?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time focusing on biotech, and I think it's a sector that's ripe for consolidation. You have large pharma names that look to acquire small and mid-cap companies that have promising drug treatments. I think that continues. Very expensive and time-consuming to put a drug through clinical trials and ultimately commercialize it. And so if a pharma can acquire a promising technology for a smaller mid-cap name and leapfrog that process, replenish the pipeline for their drugs that are going off patent, I think that will continue in 2021. Some of the areas that I think are most prevalent for consolidation: oncology plays are always hot. It's very difficult to treat certain types of cancer, and so that's an area that is often targeted for consolidation. Immunotherapy, rare diseases, gene therapy, some of the breakthrough technologies.
So given all that you've said, and if you're an investor that wants exposure to this space, how would you invest? Would you say focus on big pharma rather than their smaller peers?
Well, you have to define what type of investor you are. And if you're more of a risk-averse value investor, then you're sticking to pharma, big pharma names. They tend to be more mature companies with more predictable cash flows. A lot of them pay dividends, and so that's a good area. Lets you sleep well at night. If you're a bit more risk appetite, then I think the bigger opportunities are in the biotech sector, where they may be acquisition targets for large pharma. It comes with more volatility, and so you have to understand that some of the early stage companies or mid stage companies, they may be developing a drug that there's a binary outcome. Either they get approved by the FDA or they don't. And so you'll see a lot of volatility around those names. So just be careful.
Thanks very much, Patrick Healey there from Caliber Financial Partners. Before I go, here is some of the top news in the sector. The European Union's drugs regulator has given the green light to Johnson & Johnson's single-dose COVID-19 vaccine as the bloc seeks to speed up its inoculation campaign. The shot is the fourth to be endorsed in the EU after those made by Pfizer, AstraZeneca and Moderna. Denmark and Norway have temporarily suspended the use of AstraZeneca shots after reports of the formation of blood clots in some who have been injected. Denmark said the 14-day suspension was a, quote, cautionary decision. The move comes after Austria stopped using a batch of AstraZeneca shots while investigating a death, while the EU Medicines Agency said there was no evidence so far linking AstraZeneca to the Austria cases. Pfizer will consider making its coronavirus vaccine outside the United States and Europe only after the pandemic supply phase is over, adding it is currently not talking to India over local production. Sources told Reuters on Wednesday that the US drug maker had told the Indian government it wanted to produce the vaccine locally if assured faster approval and freedom on pricing and exports. And that's your roundup of the biotech sector. I'm Angeline Ong, and this is Reuters.